Good day, flight simmers. We're going to take a look at the Spirit of St. Louis today, the iconic aircraft that Charles Lindbergh flew non-stop across the Atlantic, the first non-stop Atlantic crossing in history, done in 1927. Took him 33 hours and 30 minutes. He left from Roosevelt Airfield in the United States near New York City, and he flew to Aéroport Le Bourget in Paris, France. Unfortunately, Roosevelt Airfield is no longer in existence. Looks like they built a shopping mall there from Google Maps, that search I did. But there is Farmingdale Airport very nearby, so we're going to take off from there, try and recreate this flight a little bit. So we're going to go to the world map and create a flight plan. Just click on world map, and I'm going to enter the airport code for Farmingdale, which is Kilo Foxtrot Romeo Golf. There it is right there. So it's pretty close to KFJ Airport. So I'm going to select, let's see, select the ramp here. Ramp, let's do ramp 50. Set as our departure. So we'll try and take off on runway 19. We can. Next thing I want to do is airport code for Le Bourget, which is Lima Foxtrot Papa Bravo. So those are your codes if you want to try this flight. And let's see if we can land on runway 07. Set that as our arrival. It looks like it's nighttime over there right now, and we're going to be flying for 32 hours and 59 minutes, but actually we're going to shorten this up because of a nice little feature Microsoft has. We're going to do low altitude airways, and it's an automatic approach because there's no autopilot in this plane, there's no ILS back then, satellites, etc. So we're going to click fly and just take a look at this airplane and talk about it a bit before we start it up. Some of the uniqueness of it. There's what the actual airplane looked like inside, and you are going to be able to see that Microsoft did a very nice job of recreating this. So this is from the Smithsonian Institute. There's a little mirror here, and over his head behind him was the actual compass. So this is a makeup mirror, a lady's makeup mirror that he attached with chewing gum, and the reflection in there, he could actually see the compass and tell what direction he was heading using the compass. So let's close that down and just take a look at a little bit of information on this airplane. So the Spirit of St. Louis, formerly the Ryan NYP, was custom built and given this registration number, which meant experimental, by the U.S. government. And Charles Lindbergh flew the plane May 20th to 21st, 1927, non-stop from Long Island, New York to Paris, France. And that's what we're going to be doing. He won the $25,000 Orteig Prize that everybody was trying to compete for, and he became famous all around the world for completing this flight. Took off from Roosevelt Field, Garden City, New York, which no longer exists, like I said, so we're flying out of a nearby airport. And he flew into Bourget Airport in France. So it's on permanent display in the Smithsonian Institute. There's the manufacturer's Ryan and designed by this Donald A. Hall. Now, Charles Lindbergh was heavily involved in the designing of this plane, and there were modifications and changes made. For one thing, there's no radio in this plane. In order to keep the weight down, he didn't even want a radio. So you can't talk to ATC with this plane. And there's a few other things when we look at the plane, you'll see some of the unique features of it. There's Charles Lindbergh, a stamp dedicated, honoring Charles Lindbergh after his flight. Now, Charles Lindbergh was an airmail pilot, so he was used to flying planes like this and very familiar with how to fly with poor visibility out the front of the plane because he had bags of mail in front of him blocking his view. So he used to lean out and look out through the side windows a lot and tip the plane a bit to get his bearings. So here's some of the statistics on the plane. So I'm just going to close that down, and here's the plane, and we're going to go ready to fly. Okay, so now you can see how nicely Microsoft has rendered the inside, even with this chart here, the little corner nipped off of it, the worn wood paneling on this dash here with the gauges. And look at this thing. I mean, it looks like the inside of a locomotive. Most people describe it as such. I'm just going to show you a few of the instruments here. We've got our throttle here, which we can control. We've got anti-ice engine, so he could put that on if it got really cold on whatever altitude he was at. There's the pitch trim that you can set yourself, and you can use your joystick if you want. There's the yoke, and I can move that with my joystick. And there's the rudders, etc. The door, you can get the door to open by clicking on it. There's only one door on that side, and then you can click on it again and pull it, and it should close. Yeah, there you go. Alrighty. We're going to take a look at this compass here and how he used it on the flight. But I'm just going to zoom in here, and we'll take a look at some of the gauges here. So there's a little periscope here that they put in, and I'll show you why when we get outside. So he could see out through this little window. There's probably a mirror here, and he would see. So one of the guys that was designing the plane had been in a submarine during the war, and he thought of this idea because there was no windshield in this thing to look out of. So here we have the Pioneer compass up here. We have a compass here. This is a mirror reflecting the compass behind him. That's inoperative. There's your fuel mixture. There's your magneto. There's your oil. Temperature. Your fuel in pounds. Here we have another temperature gauge, I believe. And this is your bank turn gauge. RPMs. And there's your airspeed. Back off, we got a clock. We got a pump, primer pump there. A little pump down here too for fuel. Manual fuel pump. Okay. A lot of little valves here, and it is said that they didn't mind having this many valves for him to try and control because it helped keep him awake during the flight. Just going to show you his rather uncomfortable seat, which is also, they say, designed that way because they didn't want to have a really comfortable seat and end up falling asleep. Got a bunch of little rings here he can pull for emergency reasons or whatever. But anyway, he couldn't even stretch out. He was a pretty tall guy, and he couldn't stretch his feet out. So for 36 or 33 hours, I mean, he wasn't able to even straighten out and stretch a bit. Now let's take a look at this little Pioneer compass device here. I'm going to set that to go east because that's where we're going to have to go up. So by scrolling with my mouse, I can put that little handle pointing east. I'm just going to fine tune it a bit there. There we go. So now if I look up here, this little, something like today's modern heading book. This needle has to be pointing right there in order to fly east. So it's going to help us stay on course, which is what he would have used during his flight. So let's take a look at the back. You can see there's a fuel tank back there. And the canvas stretched over wood and metal framing. Now we're just going to go outside for a minute. I don't know if I mentioned this is the pitch trim. So you can just set the trim. And right here we got the throttle. So you can adjust that with your mouse if you want, or you can use your joystick. And here we have the anti-ice thing. Alright, so let's go outside for a second. I'll bring in this, or I did bring it in. There we go. A little scope, periscope. Just going to go outside and look at the front of this plane. Here's the shocker, of course. No windshield. Now, why no windshield? Well, because of the design, Charles Lindbergh wanted the main fuel tank up here, moved from the back to the front, which makes it rather nose heavy, but also he had the oil tank put up here too. So that was a buffer between him and the engine in case the plane did strike the ground. On landing, he wouldn't be jammed between the main fuel tank right behind him and the engine and crushed. So in order to do that, they had to take out the windshield and put in this metal flashing over this area where the windshield normally would have been. So that's why it looks like it does. Now, one of the other things about this aircraft is there is no parking brake inside, but for some reason it is designed with the parking brake in the computer programming, so it's on right now. So I can't do a pushback on this unless I take it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control Delete on the keyboard, and I'm going to press Shift P and do a pushback. So you see those blocks disappear. Okay, so I'm just going to go outside so you can see where we're going and where we're going to try and head to fly this thing. Okay. So we're going to try and head out here and take off. See how that works. This thing's really difficult to steer. Trust me. Very difficult. You can turn your yoke to try and steer like in a normal aircraft. It would go very nicely in the direction you want to turn it, but this one for some reason doesn't respond very well. I'm going to press Shift P when I get back here a little further. We're going to do a start up here. Cold start, so you can see what you'd have to do to cold start this thing. So I'm going to press Shift P again to stop it. So I'm going to put the brake on again so it doesn't start rolling once we start it up. So let's do a checklist and start this thing up. So start engine. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shut off, fuel shut off valves you have to open. So I'm going to click on that and you can see where they are and just auto-complete that item.
Fuel shut off valve open.
I'm going to do the same for all of those. Show you where that one's at. Auto-complete.
Fuel shut off valve open.
I'm doing the next one. So they're on this side right now. Okay, another one.
Fuel shut-off valve, open.
Let's just quickly go through these.
Fuel shut-off valve, open. Fuel shut-off valve, open.
And we've got one more left to do.
Fuel shut-off valve, open.
So now our mixture.
Mixture, rich.
So our magnetos.
Magnetos, on.
Prime as required. Just going to give a little prime in here. Okay, our complete item.
Prime.
Now for ignition.
As required.
For ignition, you would click on this right here, and that'll actually start. There's somebody outside is going to spin the prop and get it started. So you would click on that, or you can just do autocomplete.
Ignition. Start.
Okay, so now it's revving up. And now throttle, you want to make sure you've got your throttle back and closed.
Throttle, closed.
And then you want to check your oil pressure and make sure that it's around 50 psi.
Oil pressure, 50 psi.
Okay, so we're good to go. I'm not going to do the taxi thing. Can't talk to ATC because there's no radio. If I try to, it'll say it's not available. So I'm just going to go outside here, and I'm going to take the parking brakes off now. See if this thing starts rolling. So Control Delete. And what I'm going to try and do is turn this thing. You can see it's rolling, but it's not turning. I think it depends on right and left brake to steer this thing. I think if you have your right and left brake keys programmed in, just put, that might be what will turn it. But it is turning rather slowly. I'm just touching the brake there. It's coming around. So Charles would have been looking out the window like this on the side probably. He probably didn't use that periscope because they said they don't even know if you used it. But anyway, I'm going to try and give you a view of the takeoff here. So we're ready to roll. Okay, we got our airspeed up and take off. So the tail's lifted off here. And this thing should lift off once it gets up to speed. So I'm just going to look out the side, like it probably did. Pull back gently, and off we go. Now we set that thing to head east, I believe, right? The compass, the Pioneer compass. So I'm going to go inside and have a look at that. First of all, I just want to get all the way forward. So you see where east is to our left. So, see where the compass is? Right here. That needle's off, so we got to get that needle lined up with this little yellow marker here. And if we do, we'll be in good shape to get on course. Now, if you want to see what your flight plan is, click on that and get this fleet back. There we go. See where we gotta go? So that's a flight plan we created with the world map. So see our needles coming around now because we're heading east the way we set that one down below. So there's a look at what Charles Lindbergh would have said. Now what we can do here to gain altitude is set our trim. Now you can do that manually inside the aircraft, or you can right here you can just use your nose button and trim up a bit. can see here my vertical speed's going up. So here we go, heading out over New York City. So like I said, this flight would take you 33.5 hours roughly to actually do in real time. But Microsoft has had a nice little feature called Travel Forward. So we're off, and we've had a good look at the plane. NX211, Charles Lindbergh, heading out to make this historic flight. From Roosevelt Airfield to Le Bourget, Paris. So what I'm going to do right now is hit Travel Forward. I'm going to top up our fuel. I don't think it's going to make any difference. I'm going to show you why. I've done this before with other planes, Travel Forward. And there's our fuel. Payload is 56%. Okay, so there's all our fuel topped up. So let's hit Travel Forward and see if we've got any fuel left when we get there. I'm going to go to approach and say yes. So when we get this thing set up to do the approach, I'm going to hit the pause button on the keyboard just to take a look at that fuel. And if you were doing it with other aircraft, you'd also want to check the autopilot still on, your altitude, etc. Now when you click approach, lots of times you're not that close to the airport, but with this plane, oh, it's okay, it's nighttime too. So we're ready to fly, and I'm going to hit pause. And what I'm going to do is change it to daylight. So, okay, so let's get a daylight arrival so we can see what's going on. And you can see there's the runway right there. Now I'm going to check the fuel like I told you. Let's check. Well, we still have some fuel left. Okay. We're not out of fuel. So if you had left it on 50%, you would have been out of fuel right now. But you can just top it up like a mid-air fueling or whatever right there. But this plane was designed to carry enough fuel to do this flight, and so it did. So he would have been trying to conserve fuel the whole way there, doing everything he could. Like his ideas of, he wouldn't even take a little mail along for symbolic reasons, because he said it would add extra weight. So we are ready to go and try and land this thing now. Now the thing that you want to be careful of is you're not going to be able to brake, because if you try and put the brakes on, you're going to nosedive. So I'm going to try, see if I can get this thing to work. I'm going to release it. And I'll put that little periscope out. Let me just go inside, put this little sucker out, see if I can actually even see out. This is pretty much useless for trying to fly this plane. This seems to work better, just peeking out the window on the side. Probably, apparently that's what he did a lot in his flying days. Alrighty, so let's release this thing. So I'm going to cut back on, so we're lined up nicely with the runway here. I'm going to cut back on the throttle, get my airspeed down. See if I can get over a little bit here and see that runway. Now you see if I go back here, I can't see it through that little periscope. So I'm going to try and bring this thing in for a landing. There are no flaps, so I need to get the speed down as much as possible. Now, they didn't give me much time to bring this plane down, unfortunately. Here I can just see the runway, so that's a help. I'm really going faster than I'd like to be going, but I'm going to try and level off here and touch down as gently as I can. And then I'm just going to have to let her run out. So you'd have been looking, you can follow the lines just like that. So I'm just letting this thing run out and die down on its own. I know if I try and touch the speed, I'm just going to gently just barely touch it. I'm not going to apply the brakes. I'm just barely touching my brake pedal. Just to see if I can get this thing to slow down. So this needed a good long runway to slow down. See there, I put the brake on a little bit and it just didn't like it at all. Now, I think I can turn off here. Alrighty. So we've landed in Paris, France, Le Bourget Airport, and the crowd will be greeting and screaming, and very shortly Charles will make world news and become famous for this flight. I'll go back inside, just peek out. Let's bring that little... I don't think he would have had this out very much during the flight itself, because it would have created drag and used up fuel. So you can see we're still rolling right along here. And if I was to put the brakes on right now, hard, this thing would just face plant. So we don't want to do that, do we? Just going to come up here and try and come to a stop. Where the crowd is waiting for us. Okay, now right when I had it almost stopped and I had the brake on, it did do a sharp pull. So obviously you got to have your speed really down and put your brake on to get it to turn. So right now I've got it stopped. I'm going to press Shift Delete to put on the parking brake. Don't worry about nose diving because it's come to a complete stop. So thank you very much for joining me on this flight recreation of Charles Lindbergh's famous transatlantic crossing in the spirit of St. Louis. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a little bit about how to fly this plane and maybe give this a try yourself.